Hello, this is Ann Stillman, and you are listening to The Poet's Lighthouse. For those lost at sea or for those that stay adrift for far too long, search for the light. And as I say light, I look at this glass Kentucky bourbon whiskey to my left, and its color is that of a maple brown, tasting like the sun. And somebody who writes with the ferocity of the summer's day, we are going to be talking about none other than the Laureate of American Lowlife, Charles Bukowski. He was an American poet, a novelist, a short story writer. Bukowski's work mainly addressed the poor Americans, the act of writing, alcohol, relationships with women, and the drudgery of work. A man who was hated by many, a man that repulsed many others. Charles Bukowski wrote first and foremost for himself. And as we're going along reading each poem, I think it's only a nod to his work, to be sipping on whiskey. And we're going to start off today by defining the magic of what makes a good poem, with Charles Bukowski's poem, Defining the Magic. A good poem is like a cold beer when you need it. A good poem is a hot turkey sandwich when you're hungry. A good poem is a gun when the mob corners you. A good poem is something that allows you to walk through the streets of hell. A good poem can make death melt like hot butter. A good poem can frame agony and hang it on a wall. A good poem can let your feet touch china. A good poem can make a broken mind fly. A good poem can let you shake hands with Mozart. A good poem can let you shoot craps with the devil and win. A good poem can do almost anything. And most important, a good poem knows when to stop. And one of my favorite lines out of that poem had to be, a good poem is a gun when the mob corners you. And sometimes when we get to a point where we need something that powerful in our hand, it's because of not so nice things that have happened to us. Like bullies and humans and just the cruel world. And it's because of them that gets us going, that gets us running, that gets us fighting. And that brings us to our next poem, titled The Loser. And the next I remembered, I'm on a table. Everybody's gone, the head of bravery under light, scowling, flailing me down. And then some toad stood there, smoking a cigar. Kid, you're no fighter, he told me. And I got up and knocked him over a chair. It was a scene in a movie, and he stayed there on his big rump and said over and over, Jesus, Jesus, what's the matter with you? And I got up and dressed, the tape still on my hands, and when I got home I tore the tape off my hands and wrote my first poem, and I've been fighting ever since. And that's because you have to. Life doesn't stop for us. Life keeps rolling, and whether we keep going with the punches or we're getting kicked as we go along, the world's got places to be, and it's gonna get you there whether you want to or not. And as Bukowski got kicked and muddled through the ground, all sorts of people thanked him for his writing. Thanked him for giving him hope. But Bukowski felt a certain way about it. And he explains himself in his next poem, Met a Man on the Street. Met a man on the street who said, You've kept me going for 2 years. It's really amazing to meet you. Thank you, I answered. But who's going to keep me going? I've asked this question before, and all I ever get back is a gentle smile. But it's a good question. They have no idea that I consider suicide several times a week. They've read some of my books, and that's enough for them. But I only write that crap. I can't read it. And it's a terrible feeling to live for others, to be there for others. A shoulder, a support. Atlas holding up the world. And sometimes it's not fair that way, while your knees buckle, while sweat drips down your brow. But no matter how bad things get, Bukowski always has this one thought he reminds himself of, and it's in his next poem. Well, that's just the way it is. Sometimes when everything seems at its worst, when all conspires and gnaws and the hours, days, weeks, years seems wasted, stretched there upon my bed in the dark, looking upward at the ceiling, I get what many will consider an obnoxious thought. It's still nice to be Bukowski. And yes, that is quite true. Many will consider that to be an obnoxious thought. But Bukowski didn't care what others thought. He was just giving the people exactly what this next poem is titled, What They Want. Vallejo writing about loneliness while starving to death. Van Gogh's ear rejected by a whore. Rimbaud running off to Africa to look for gold and finding an incurable case of syphilis. Beethoven gone deaf, Pound dragged through the streets in a cage. Chatterton taking rat poison, Hemingway's brains dropping into their orange juice. Pascal cutting his wrist in the bathtub, Artaud locked up with a mad. Dostoevsky stood up against a wall, Crane jumping into a boat propeller, Lorca shot in the road by Spanish troops. Berryman jumping off a bridge, Burroughs shooting his wife, Mailer knifing his. That's what they want, a goddamn show, a lit billboard in the middle of hell. That's what they want. A bunch of dull, inarticulate, safe, dreary admirers of carnivals. And those are the ones who got known. There are many others, many nameless, who never go recognized, who never get the attention. And so this is for them. In Bukowski's next poem, It's Not Who Lived Here. It's not who lived here, but who died here. And it's not when, but how. It's not the known great, but the great who died unknown. It's not the history of countries, but the lives of men. Fables are dreams, not lies. And truth changes as men change. And when truth becomes stable, men will become dead, and the insect and the fire and the flood will become truth. And you'll be hearing a few of these poems and think to yourself, what does this guy know? How could he possibly know what's all true? But one thing he did get right was pain. And he writes about it in this next poem, My Garden. In the sun and in the rain, and in the day and in the night, pain is a flower. Pain is flowers, blooming all the time. And one flower of his, one he was quite fond of, wilted away. And you learn about it in his next poem, My First Affair with That Older Woman. When I look back now at the abuse I took from her, I feel shame that I was so innocent. But I must say, she did match me drink for drink. And I realized that her life, her feelings for things, had been ruined along the way, and that I was no more than a temporary companion. She was 10 years older and mortally hurt by the past and the present. She treated me badly. Desertion, other men. She brought me immense pain. Continually. She lied, stole, there was desertion, other men. Yet we had our moments, and our little soap opera ended with her in a coma in the hospital. And I sat at her bed for hours, talking to her, and then she opened her eyes and saw me. I knew it would be you, she said. Then she closed her eyes. The next day she was dead. I drank alone for 2 years after that. And it's painful losing someone. And no matter how painful any type of love can be, I feel like it's always worth experiencing it. And that's the scary thing about love. You don't know how long you've got it for. And no matter how much pain that might cause you, there are always worse things. Which leads us into our next poem, Oh Yes, by Charles Bukowski. There are worse things than being alone, but it often takes decades to realize this, and most often, when you do, it's too late, and there's nothing worse than too late. But I will tell you one thing, it is never too late to go back to yourself, to your true self. No matter if you lost yourself along the way, give it a day, give it a few days, a week, some months, a couple of years, you'll find yourself. And Bukowski had to experience that with his next poem, Metamorphosis. A girlfriend came in, built me a bed, scrubbed and waxed the kitchen floor, scrubbed the walls, vacuumed, cleaned the toilet, the bathtub, scrubbed the bathroom floor, and cut my toenails and my hair. Then, all on the same day, the plumber came and fixed the kitchen faucet and the toilet, and the gas man fixed the heater, and the phone man fixed the phone. Now I sit in all this perfection. It is quiet. I have broken off with all 3 of my girlfriends. I felt better when everything was in disorder. It will take me some months to get back to normal. I can't even find a roach to commune with. I have lost my rhythm. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I have been robbed of my filth. And I'm the same way. I could live a very ratty life. Things could be torn and tossed and chucked all over the place, but best believe I know where exactly everything is. And this, with his next poem, I Am Chastised. She was driving the car. There was a sharp disagreement about something. She parked and we got out to go into the cafe to eat, and I told her, "Without me, you are nothing, and with me, you are even less." She said, "You know, I really have to laugh at you. You are so pathetic when you try to act superior." I didn't answer. We entered, were led to a table, and opened our menus. "I'll have a Chinese beer," I told the waitress. "Now." And look at his bluff go down, right? Trying to be demanding. And oddly enough, the very first time I read this poem, to me it sounded like a relationship between God and human. And this is one of my favorite Bukowski poems just because it encapsulates pretty much who he was as a person. But the kind of person he also was someone who wasn't willing to let the gods win. He wasn't willing to stay on the floor. He wasn't ready to roll over and just die. Not without a fight. And how does one man endure so much? Well, it's a kind of fire in him. And Bukowski wrote about this in his poem, This Kind of Fire. Sometimes I think the gods deliberately keep pushing me into the fire, just to hear me yelp a few good lines. They just aren't going to let me retire. Silk scarf about neck, giving lectures at Yale. The gods need me to entertain them. They must be terribly bored with all the others, and I am too. And now my cigarette lighter has gone dry. I sit here hopelessly flicking it. This kind of fire they can't give me. And whether there's gods trying to take that fire out of you, or the world is trying to bury you 6 feet under, you can't give up. And that leads us to our next poem. That's why funerals are so sad. He's got all the tools, but he's lazy. Has no fire, the ladies drain his senses, his emotions. He just wants to drive his flashy car. He gets a wax job once a month, throws away the shoes when they get scuffed, but he's got the best right hand in the business, and his left hook can cave in a man's ribs, if I can get him to do it. But he has no goddamn imagination. He's in the top 10, but the music is missing. He makes the money, but it's all going to get away from him. Someday he's not going to be able to do even the little he's doing now. His idea of victory is to pull down as many women's panties as he can. He's champ at that. And when you see me screaming at him in his corner between rounds, I'm trying to awaken him to the fact that the time is now. He just grins at me. Hell, you fight him, he's a bitch. You have no idea, cousin, how many men can do it but won't. And that's the thing. How many of us can but don't? How many of us are scared? If only all of us took it upon ourselves to charge. And that's what Bukowski writes about in his next poem, No Leaders, Please. Invent yourself and then reinvent yourself. Don't swim in the same slough. Invent yourself and then reinvent yourself and stay out of the clutches of mediocrity. Invent yourself and then reinvent yourself. Change your tone and shape so often they can never categorize you. Reinvigorate yourself and accept what is, but only on the terms that you have invented and reinvented. Be self-taught and reinvent your life because you must. It is your life and its history in the present belong only to you. And don't be afraid if life lugs haymakers your way, just take 'em. Because guess what? Bukowski has a few words for you in his next poem. Out of the sick room and into the white blazing sun. Hey, you're not dead. You're doing good, damn good again. Let's just talk about tossing it in. What you were doing while you were feeling sick enough to die, what you were doing was just recharging your batteries. Now let everybody get out of the way. You're thundering down the track again like a locomotive hauling 90,000 unwritten poems, and they're all yours. And you're pounding along the rails, sometimes through dark tunnels, but then roaring out again into the light. Who the hell said that you no longer had it in you? It was you who said that, the engineer, who is now feeling the fresh surge of hope and power and who is grinning madly at the thought of this wonderful new day. And as the days come, you have to make something of them. Whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's talking or speaking your mind, whether it's taking charge, whether it's protecting someone else whose voice is quite too small, you have to do something. Do so as many others have done before. Just like these few in Bukowski's next poem, Beasts Bounding Through Time. Van Gogh writing his brother for paints, Hemingway testing his shotgun, Celine going broke as a doctor of medicine, the impossibility of being human. Villon expelled from Paris for being a thief, Faulkner drunk in the gutters of his own town, the impossibility of being human. Burroughs killing his wife with a gun, Mailer stabbing his, the impossibility of being human. Maupassant going mad in a rowboat, Dostoevsky lined up against the wall to be shot, Crane off the back of a boat into the propeller, the impossibility. Sylvia with her head in the oven like a baked potato, Harry Crosby leaping into that black sun, Lorca murdered in the road by Spanish troops, the impossibility. Artaud sitting on a madhouse beach, Chatterton drinking rat poison, Shakespeare a plagiarist, Beethoven with a horn stuck into his head against deafness, the impossibility, the impossibility. Nietzsche gone totally mad, the impossibility of being human. All too human, this breathing in and out and in. These punks, these cowards, these champions, these mad dogs of glory, moving this little bit of light towards us. Impossibly. And while we named a few in the last one, we're not going to name anyone this time. We're all going to be under the eye of Bukowski in his next poem, The Crunch. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. Laughter or tears, haters, lovers, strangers with faces like the backs of thumbtacks. Armies running through streets of blood, waving wine bottles, bayoneting and fucking virgins. Or an old guy in a cheap room with a photograph of M. Monroe. There is a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock. People so tired, mutilated either by love or no love. People just are not good to each other, one-on-one. The rich are not good to the rich, the poor are not good to the poor. We are afraid. Our educational system tells us that we can all be big-ass winners. It hasn't told us about the gutters or the suicides, or the terror of one person aching in one place alone, untouched, unspoken to, watering a plant. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. I suppose they never will be. I don't ask them to be. But sometimes I think about it. The beads will swing, the clouds will cloud, and the killer will behead the child, like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. More haters than lovers. People are not good to each other. Perhaps if they were, our deaths would not be so sad. Meanwhile, I look at young girls, stems, flowers of chance. There must be a way. Surely there must be a way we have not yet thought of. Who put this brain inside of me? It cries, it demands, it says that there is a chance. It will not say no. The next poem prepares us to take our lives into our own hands and to have control of it and do what we wish. With this next poem, The Laughing Heart. Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There is light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life. Sometimes. And the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight. But we are humans. And sometimes the delight to us isn't so delightful for others. And that leads us to our next poem, Side of the Sun. The bulls are grand as the side of the sun, and although they kill them for the still crowds, it is the bull that burns the fire. And although there are cowardly bulls as there are cowardly matadors and cowardly men, generally the bull stands pure and dies pure, untouched by symbols or cliques or false loves. And when they drag him out, nothing has died. Something has passed, and the eventual stench is the world. And that's how we are by nature. There is no helping that. And that leads us to our next poem, No Help for That. There is a place in the heart that will never be filled, a space, and even during the best moments and the greatest times, we will know it. We will know it more than ever. There is a place in the heart that will never be filled, and we will wait and wait in that space. And sometimes, like many other things, we can never get rid of it. We only make room for it. So let's go into his next poem. Another one of my favorites by his, The Bluebird. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And we sleep together like that, with our secret pact, and it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you? And there's not much more I could say than what Bukowski's next poem's title will, and it's Let It Enfold You. Either peace or happiness, let it enfold you. When I was a young man, I felt these things were dumb, unsophisticated. I had bad blood, a twisted mind, a precarious upbringing. I was hard as granite. I leered at the sun. I trusted no man and especially no woman. I was living a hell in small rooms. I broke things, smashed things, walked through glass, cursed. I challenged everything, was continually being evicted, jailed, in and out of fights, in and out of my mind. Women were something to screw and rail at. I had no male friends. I changed jobs and cities. I hated holidays, babies, history, newspapers, museums, grandmothers, marriage, movies, spiders, garbage men, English accents, Spain, France, Italy, walnuts, and the color orange. Algebra angered me. Opera sickened me. Charlie Chaplin was a fake, and flowers were for pansies. Peace and happiness to me were signs of inferiority, tenets of the weak and addled mind. But as I went on with my alley fights, my suicidal years, my passage through any number of women, it gradually began to occur to me that I wasn't different from the others. I was the same. They were all fulsome, with hatred, glossed over with petty grievances. The men I fought in alleys had hearts of stone. Everybody was nudging, inching, cheating for some insignificant advantage. The lie was the weapon and the plot was empty. Darkness was the dictator. Cautiously, I allowed myself to feel good at times. I found moments of peace in cheap rooms, just staring at the knobs of some dresser or listening to the rain in the dark. The less I needed, the better I felt. Maybe the other life had worn me down. I no longer found glamour in topping somebody in conversation or in mounting the body of some bored drunken female whose life had slipped away into sorrow. I could never accept life as it was. I could never gobble down all its poisons, but there were parts, tenuous magic parts, open for the asking. I reformulated. I don't know when, date, time, all that, but the change occurred. Something in me relaxed, smoothed out. I no longer had to prove that I was a man. I didn't have to prove anything. I began to see things. Coffee cups lined up behind a counter in a cafe, or a dog walking along a sidewalk, or the way the mouse on my dresser stopped there. With its body, its ears, its nose, it was fixed. A bit of life caught within itself, and its eyes looked at me, and they were beautiful. Then, it was gone. I began to feel good. I began to feel good in the worst situations, and there were plenty of those. Like, say, the boss behind his desk, he is going to have to fire me. I've missed too many days. He is dressed in a suit, necktie, glasses. He says, I am going to have to let you go. It's all right, I tell him. He must do what he must do. He has a child. He has a wife, a house, children, expenses, most probably a girlfriend. I am sorry for him. He is caught. I walk onto the blazing sunshine. The whole day is mine, temporarily anyhow. The whole world is at the throat of the world. Everybody feels angry, shortchanged, cheated. Everybody is despondent, disillusioned. I welcomed shots of peace, tattered shards of happiness. I embraced that stuff like the hottest number, like high heels, breasts, singing, the works. Don't get me wrong. There is such a thing as cockeyed optimism that overlooks all basic problems just for the sake of itself. This is a shield and a sickness. The knife got near my throat again. I almost turned on the gas again. But when the good moments arrived again, I didn't fight them off like an alley adversary. I let them take me. I luxuriated in them. I made them welcome home. I haven't looked into the mirror once, having thought myself to be ugly. I now liked what I saw. Almost handsome, yes, a bit ripped and ragged, scars, lumps, odd turns, but all in all, not too bad. Almost handsome, better at least than some of those movie star faces like the cheeks of a baby's butt. And finally I discovered real feelings of others, unheralded. Like lately, like this morning, as I was leaving for the track, I saw my wife in bed, just the shape of her head there. not forgetting centuries of the living and the dead and the dying. The pyramids, Mozart dead, but his music still there in the room. Weeds growing, the earth turning, the tote board waiting for me. I saw the shape of my wife's head. She's so still. I ached for her life, just being there under the covers. I kissed her in the forehead, got down the stairway, got outside, got into the marvelous car, fixed the seatbelt, backed out the drive. Feeling warm to the fingertips, down to my foot on the gas pedal, I entered the world once more. Drove down the hill, past the houses full and empty of people. I saw the mailman, honked. He waved back at me. And that was a little insight into Charles Bukowski, someone who writes extremely raw. Not many of us would be able to walk a few steps in his shoes. A man who survived through hell, left us with one thing on his gravestone: don't try. This has been Ant Stolman. Thank you.